This movie is stunning. Watching it in theaters again after being away so long was a nice way to wake up from the pandemic nightmare. Experiencing the one-shots, the soundtrack, the costume design, makeup and hairstyling, and, yes, the Cinemotive design, all on the big screen in full glory was such a treat. I wasn't expecting the desire to make this video, but after walking out the theater, I couldn't resist. In all of these videos, I ask the question, is this the right vehicle for the character? I don't have to do that. I think it will become pretty clear early why the answer is yes, but I'm going to use that question to maintain the format of these videos. There's some fascinating history behind the adaptations of the De Ville vehicle, so let's explore that before providing all the reasons why the 1974 Panther De Ville works so well for this fashionista. In a fit of insomnia, I actually read the entire book in all its cringy glory. The original changes for the animated adaptation were a big improvement on the story, and I'm so glad that the movie was my first exposure. I didn't want to read it, but the insomnia, combined with the year discrepancies of the 1974 Panther in the 1996 live-action adaptation, the 1961 animated movie, and the 1956 book release, leads to a journey through the minds of the original Walt Disney animators. How did the designers come up with the vehicle for the villain in 1961? During my read of the 1956 novel, I highlighted every description of Cruella's car. From the text, we know it's fast and loud in context to 1956. The car horn was the loudest in London, and the engine was just as equally significant to identifying the car from a distance. The car is able to travel 2 miles on country roads in 2 minutes, which isn't particularly impressive for something of the time period, given the desperation of Cruella's search for the 97 Dalmatian pups. Yes, 97 is the whole thing with the author, though that desperation would likely have caused significant damage to the 50s suspension. We also know the colors were a striped black and white so that it looked like a moving zebra crossing. And the last detail, that the headlights were blinding even for closed puppy eyes. So, with the book's description of loud car, both engine and horn, black and white striped in color, and with blinding headlights, and the trivia that it can traverse rural roads in speeds greater than 60 miles per hour. Why does UK literature sometimes use the imperial system of measurement? What did Disney come up with 13 years before the Panther De Ville's release? Before we get into that, I want to take a pause for the trivia enthusiast. Yes, there was a friendly competition of who could create a more terrifying villain in either Cruella De Ville or the rescuers Madame Medusa. And yes, Madame Medusa's character was based off the character the Diamond Duchess from the book Miss Bianca, and though they share similar vehicle designs in their respective animated movies, there isn't anything noteworthy in the second Rescuers book that would determine what that car would look like. And anyway, 101 Dalmatians came first, so shall we? When the movie began development in the 1950s, there were several underlying technological hurdles that they needed to go through. Drawing, inking, and then photographing was an expensive process. The animators were able to use Xerox photography so that they could, in a sense, skip the inking step. Though it cut production costs nearly in two, Walt Disney wasn't a fan of the artistic direction and became disenchanted. However, this process became super important for the animation of Cruella's car. Instead of animating through traditional frame drawings, the studio animators built an actual white model of her car out of cardboard with bold black lines on the edges. To make the wheels articulate, the animators took a long piece of cloth, taped little pieces of wooden dowel underneath it, and then put the car on top of a cloth suspended from a kite string. They'd pull this fabric tight with all these wooden pieces underneath the wheels, and they would shoot a take of that. To give it the look that the car had suspension, they put in springs, smart, so it would have this little bouncy effect. The footage would then be run through the same Xerox process to later be painted to what was seen in the final film. It's amazingly inventive and is a testament to just how important the creative arts are to technology. Regardless, they didn't have the Panther De Ville to mimic their animations from. Instead, they needed other reference points. The safe bet for this time period in general is always the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, which actually has some history with Cruella's car. At least those classic DK books published a glossary called Disney Villains, The Essential Guide, which says the car is a custom Rolls-Royce, but there are conflicting sources. What they actually went with for the black and white Mean Machine was the 1936 Alvis Speed 20 drophead coupe. The timelessness of that design for that period was perfect for describing the fashionado. The architect, movie star, or fashion designer had a yearning beyond what the luxuries of the day could afford, so they often looked back. The design of the 20s and 30s, especially designs linked to the pre-World War II era, were significant for the encouragement of a better, less war-tainted life. So we have an animated car that offers fast, loud, and bright headlights, but no black and white styling resonating with a zebra crossing. We won't get this color scheme until Glenn Close offers her take on the increasingly storied villain. By the time 1996 and the live-action adaptation rolled around, and Roger's profession had changed yet again and would again for Cruella, there were some obvious steps taken to keep the adaptations relevant to the times. However, by this time the Panther De Ville had gone through its production tenure. Anytime this particular Panther model is discussed, the quote gets passed that it was conceived to appeal to the taste of the nouveau-rich customers by Robert Jankel. It seems odd now, but remember, it's 2021, and we've likely forgotten what words like nouveau were supposed to mean. Nouveau-rich just means newly rich, used to describe a people that likely acquired their wealth within their generation. So this is a class of people who sometimes derogatorily were seen as untrained in their wealth and extravagance. The kind of person who could afford 2 Jaguars, but opted for 1 Panther instead. In the story as we see it now, we can separate the 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close and Cruella with Emma Stone. Though depending on who you talk to, it's a trilogy? Those people are silly. From here on out, we'll only look at Cruella and its time periods, though there could be some overlap. Glenn Close had set the precedent of the 1974 Panther De Ville, but is the act of reusing this car the right decision, and more specifically, does it fit the story for Cruella? Cruella's story, well, her memory, begins in 1964 as she narrates it. By the time we get to the modern storytelling of the movie, we've reached the late 1970s, a time period which was very much also seeing a rise in the punk rock revolution. Dewey Finn would probably do better with dates and the gluing together of these two events, but it will do just fine to say that punk rock became huge in the UK in 1976, just in time for Cruella's rise. By this time, the Panther De Ville had been in production for 2 years or so, and the newly rich, certainly those within the fashion world, fashion design itself only starting 60 years previously, had ample opportunity to acquire one of the 60 produced and showcase their cars across London. Now here's where the story gets tricky. The car stolen from Cruella's first fashion appearance is a Panther De Ville, one of the 60. Having never learned how to drive, she crashes through the streets before finally pausing to look out over the water and give proper room to process that, well, that's a spoiler, I suppose. Then, later on, Horace steals and modifies a different black and white Panther De Ville, a second out of the 60 produced. If only 60 were made through the 11-year production run, how many were in London in just the few years of production? If it's stolen, surely they'd be able to spot a missing vehicle, even if it's given a new paint job. And she's just been given an immense fortune, and laid claim over the Baroness's power. Never mind. I'd probably be scared to say anything as well. Despite the production discrepancy, the De Ville allows Cruella to craft her surname in this adaptation. With it, she stands on its roof to modify the newly acquired manor's name into the fabled Hell Hall. Yes, the devil imagery is there, and if you're firmly rooted in ensuring your salvation and have a bone to pick with this adaptation, I'm sorry to say this, but that imagery has been in the source material since 1956. And you had ample time to do your research, darling. But come on, if that car isn't spectacular casting, I don't know what is. Cruella is one of those movies where, if I were reviewing the movie and not talking about the cars, then I'd have more good things to say than bad. Of the live-action remakes, it's my favorite, and I just went back and checked to make sure it was true. I really enjoyed Maleficent as well. It just works better to me when it's not an adaptation, but rather a derivative work. Anyway, that's not what you're here for. At least, I hope you're here for the cars. Is this the right vehicle for the character? Of course it is. It fits all of the description from the book to the animated movie and the live-action adaptation. Actually, this is the first Picture Cars video that covers a car that originally came from a book. No less a book that doesn't give any indication to what its model would be, only some descriptive language for animators and then Cinemotive designers to work from. Save the red of the animated car, both the Panther De Ville and the Alvis Speed 20 offer the loud engine and bright headlights for a class of person that had just acquired their fortune and were ready to make a powerful statement. Thanks for watching. This video had a lot of surprising firsts, and I really enjoyed making it. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you have another car you'd like me to analyze, animated or live action, let me know in the comments below. Finally, make sure to subscribe, because there's more content like this coming your way. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in the next one.